In this episode of Parkour Stories, we're going to dive into detail about the MOTUS projects, its inception, the team, plus a whole lot more. So, without further ado, let's get started. The MOTUS projects was started in 2015 by parkour filmmaker Giles Campbell Longley. Giles started parkour in 2003 after watching the Channel 4 documentary Jump London and originally trained in Cranbrook.
But I know something about you. You went to Cranbrook, that's a private school.
Giles went on to pick up his dad's camera and start filming videos at Parkour Jams. A jam is the name of an event where a big group of parkour and freerunning practitioners all meet up for a big training session together. This is usually, but not limited to, city locations such as London, Brighton or Guildford. Giles's love for filming became apparent after breaking his wrist, and he spent his spare time editing old video footage.
I remember I broke my wrist, and for that whole time I just edited old footage and put up probably 3 videos of all the same footage, which nowadays you wouldn't do.
He partnered with his friend Jamie and they committed to creating Visive Productions, where Giles quickly made a name for himself by producing high quality videos with athletes such as Tim Livewire Sheaf.
So I got Jamie, who was working with me at the time, and just said to him, he was into photography and we've always been good friends since school, and he's got an interest in things like that, so I was just like, do you want to do this? Should we just commit to doing this? And he seemed up for it, and he kind of offered, he had a studio space in his garden that we could use. And at that stage it was it wasn't like money was going to appear out of nowhere. And
Giles went on to not only produce music video and promotional content, but he went on to work with Base 79, creating content for a parkour YouTube channel called Flow. Giles travelled the world documenting events and meeting some of the biggest names within the parkour community. When Flow slowly started to slow down in 2014, Giles started to get to work on a project he had an idea for a little while, and that was the MOTUS projects. In late 2014-2015, Giles started the MOTUS projects, originally making around 50 t-shirts and giving them away for free to his friends and other athletes around the world. Giles would then go on to work on the MOTUS project's first clothing capsule, the Incipio collection. Incipio is Latin for begin, and with this collection being the first from the MOTUS projects, with MOTUS being Latin for movement, it made total sense. The MOTUS projects released their first big video, titled Origins, on June 26, 2016. The video showcased 4 young athletes that the MOTUS projects had sponsored. They were training around the birthplace of parkour, which is Nice in France. The video had the intention of paying homage to classic parkour videos and bringing the new generation of athletes to the birthplace to see how the MOTUS project sponsored athletes could adapt their styles of movement to the iconic spots. The 4 original athletes on the roster were Joseph Marks, Keelan Ryan, Max Barker and Luke Stones. For a group of insanely young individuals, most of them being 15 years old at the time, the video truly highlighted the new wave of athletes, giving them the platform to gain recognition within the parkour community. Not too long after the release of the Origins collection, the MOTUS projects teamed up with London-based parkour team Run London to produce a new clothing collection and an insane new video titled Resurgence. Resurgence means an increase or revival after a period of little activity, popularity or occurrence. And the idea of this video was to showcase the movement within the London community, which around this period of 2016 to 2017 had seen a little bit of a dip from within. The video features newly sponsored athlete to the MOTUS projects, Robbie Griffith, as well as some of the London regulars including Jaden Clark, Jake and Sampa. The video was incredibly well received by the community, and with the inclusion of a 15-year-old Max Barker becoming the second individual to hit the IMAX Grand Prix, this video would really help cement the brand's reputation within the scene. From this, the MOTUS projects went on to host the first parkour and freerunning film festival, which has ran every year since, giving creatives within the parkour community a chance to show off their talents behind the camera. In the summer of 2017, the MOTUS projects travelled the United States to shoot a series for their YouTube channel titled Spitting in the Wind, a play on words from the quote, pissing in the wind. The series highlights the good memories and the times from the trip, but also dives into the struggles of travelling, such as their van getting broken into and their possessions being stolen. During this time, the MOTUS projects were also releasing new clothing consistently, which is expected, being a parkour clothing brand. They also travelled the States again the year after, filming a project called Cinnamon Toast Crunch. This project would see one of the gnarliest bails in a parkour video to date, with Luke unfortunately slipping on a gainer and fracturing his skull. The team would continue to travel to events such as NAPC and For the Love of Movement, where they would create short documentaries about the event as opposed to a general training video. What the MOTUS Projects does really well is tell stories behind some of the biggest events within parkour. This stems from Giles's background as a filmmaker, and the narrative and informative structure really highlights what goes on behind the scenes of these parkour events. It was during this time that the MOTUS Projects had started teasing the idea of a new concept called Soul Destroyer, with a poster being delivered with every order, with the release date promising to be spring-summer 2019. However, due to delays, factory issues, potential lawsuits and a whole load more, the Soul Destroyer project would be pushed back, bringing some fear into the team as they didn't know if the project was leading down a path of being overhyped. In 2020, after the first wave of the COVID-19 pandemic, the MOTUS Projects released their first pay-for-view film, Soul Destroyer. The film was a 40-minute-long extravaganza of movement, with the option to pay for commentary and behind-the-scenes video in the deluxe edition. The film was paired with an insane clothing collection, which featured some of the most progressional pieces of parkour attire to date. This included the Soul Destroyer Reaper pendant and the Hawaiian-style overshirt, with printing that was made from the footmarks left when training parkour.
This is serious stuff. It became pretty apparent that I needed to experiment quite a bit. I needed to create some variants, so I was testing different ways that I would land on the wall, how much my feet would skid down.
It was in this period where Giles and Keelan would launch the MOTUS Podcast, a parkour podcast which gives the listener behind-the-scenes insight into the MOTUS Projects, as well as interviews with some of the biggest names within the parkour scene. This again is what the MOTUS Projects does really, really well. Giles and Keelan are incredibly transparent with the audience and the listeners, and rather than pretending everything runs smooth and swimmingly, they aren't afraid to tell the stories of the issues and stress that comes from running a parkour clothing brand. Following Soul Destroyer, the MOTUS Projects have picked up an incredible amount of steam, now having 2 teams under the MOTUS Projects name. There is the Pro Team, which consists of Keelan Ryan, Max Barker, Luke Stones, Joseph Marks, Robbie Griffith, Johnston McPherson Stewart, George McGowan, Jordan Tyler Lee, and Camilla Stefianu, and a Flow Team, which consists of Travis Verkey, Rachel Goff, and Ethan Rude. Following this, the MOTUS Projects have just moved into the workshop, which is described as a space of creativity and growth. It is the only place to gain exclusive insight into the MOTUS Projects. By bringing a key aspect of the brand under one roof, they have enabled more control over the processes and providing an increasing number of career opportunities for their team and others close to MOTUS. They say that we also really wanted a sick HQ that captures the spirit and culture of parkour, where we can hang out and share stuff with you guys. Through investments in equipment and machinery, they are now producing a growing number of products in-house. This decision helps them on their mission to be a more responsible brand, as they can now create items in more limited quantities rather than needing to meet factory minimums. You can gain access to the MOTUS Projects workshop by signing up to their Patreon, which is linked in the description, and starts for as little as £1 for the base membership. Here you get behind the scenes on what the MOTUS Projects is working on, a secret members only store, and you can have your say on upcoming MOTUS Projects pieces that the brand is working on. As of May 2021, the MOTUS Project is ploughing full steam ahead, currently working on their new SS21 range, Get Lost. I won't give too much information on this as it is Patreon exclusive stuff, but it is definitely a collection to keep your eyes on. So, that is the story of the MOTUS Projects as of May 2021. It is evident that the MOTUS Projects is more than just a clothing brand for parkour at this point, and they seem to really be pushing the industry of parkour through video, and now with potential careers for those in the community via the workshop. I'm super interested to see what the MOTUS Projects comes up with in the future, and would love to see the brand continue to grow. If you did like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button to be notified when the next episode of Parkour Stories is up. Also, why not leave a suggestion as to who you would like to see featured in the next episode. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next one.